Well, the book is called Faithless Execution, and it explains that impeachment actually has two components. One is a legal component, and the other is a political component. And as between the two, the political one is actually the one that's much more consequential. I think in their genius, the framers wanted us to have a clear impeachment standard. That is, they wanted to be very clear about what kind of misconduct was required to remove a president. And that's how they came up with this high crimes and misdemeanor standard, which is really something that was adapted from British law and involves, as Hamilton put it, the misconduct of public men. It's not really about crimes and misdemeanors in the conventional sense. It's more along the lines of breaches of fiduciary duty. It's more redolent, actually, of military justice codes like dereliction of duty, conduct unbecoming. And what they were really concerned about was any activities by the president that could undermine our governing structure, in particular, the separation of powers. So I think once you understand what high crimes and misdemeanors is, and the fact that you don't have to be indictable to be removable, it's not conventional crimes and misdemeanors, it becomes pretty clear that there are a number of provable high crimes and misdemeanors that have been committed. But the other thing the framers wanted was, that besides a clear standard, they wanted to make it hard to remove the president because they knew it would be very disruptive to the society. So they also put in a requirement of a supermajority that has to vote for removal in the Senate. So you need to be able to get a 2/3 majority in the Senate before the president can be removed. And what that ensures is that the president will never be removed absent a strong public will in the American people, a pretty broad consensus that cuts across partisan lines and ideological lines that demands the removal of the president, or is at least open-minded about it. So the bottom line is you can have 1,000 impeachable offenses, but if there's not public will and a public conclusion that the president ought to be removed, he won't be removed.
But even if there was a public interest in doing it without a 2/3 majority in the Senate, and as long as the Democrats maintain control of the Senate, what are the prospects?
Well, it would really depend. If there's no public consensus for it, it will never happen. If there was a strong public consensus for it, if either there was such a crescendo from this amassment of misconduct that we've seen, or if there was one big thing that put it over the top, such that the public came to the conclusion that President Obama was unfit to wield power, and was convinced enough about that it would create political pressure on the Senate, that would be the only way that you would have a chance even to remove him. And I'm of a mind that there's no moral victories in just impeaching the president. The president can be impeached in the sense that the accusation of high crimes and misdemeanors can be lodged with a simple majority of the House. But impeachment is the wrong road to go down unless you have a realistic chance of removing the president. So what my book argues is that what we ought to be doing is making presidential lawlessness a key issue in our political debate.
Lawlessness is a confusing term. How should we interpret it in this context?
Well, the president's job in our Constitution is essentially to execute the laws faithfully. So when the president doesn't execute the laws, especially when he doesn't have a constitutional objection to them, when he's just got mere policy disagreements with Congress, then he is violating his main obligation under the Constitution. The president is the only constitutional officer in our government who is required by the Constitution to take an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and to execute the laws faithfully. So when he doesn't execute them, that's lawlessness. And I think what you've also seen in many contexts with President Obama is flat-out lawlessness, like fraud. So we've seen fraud in the context of Obamacare. We've seen fraud in the context of Benghazi, when after the Benghazi massacre, which everyone knew from the first was a terrorist attack, they painted it as if it were the caused by spontaneous reaction to an anti-Muslim video, which was just nonsense. Right. Fraud is a big part of it, and dereliction of duty is a big part of it, which is everything from the shocking failure to provide security for our people in Benghazi, the even more shocking failure to come to the rescue of Americans when they were under a terrorist siege, and even as recently as just a couple of days ago, or I guess a couple of weeks ago at this point, the decision to return 5 top Taliban commanders to the Taliban at a time when the Taliban is still conducting offensive jihadist operations against our troops.
Do you see a pattern or notice a pattern? People say, are there just coincidences that American foreign policy with regard to the Arab Spring just happens to bring Islamists to power? Or do you think that there's a willful agenda?
You mean on the part of the Islamic supremacists or on
the part of the administration?
If you're going to promote democracy, and your distorted view of democracy is that it's really just about popular elections, my own view of it is that democracy is a culture, and popular elections is the last part of the development of it, not the first. If you're gonna switch that and make popular elections the thing that you're pushing for, in the Middle East, if you have popular elections, you're going to have Islamic supremacists come to power. Even before the Arab Spring, all of the polling that was done, or a good deal of the polling that was done, told us that in margins of upwards of 2/3, depending on where you ask the questions, people in the region wanted to live under Sharia law. So it was no surprise that once they had the opportunity to elect their own leaders and overthrow despots, that what they voted for was Sharia movements and Sharia constitutions.